Well, that sucked. Yeah, just lost all of that because the frickin' power decided to flash off. Let me go delete the first one. Hold on. Let me... Yeah, Appalachian Electric. They're the worst electric company in the world. Okay. Well, while that's deleting. But yeah, sorry about that. Stupid, power just completely flashed off. So now I gotta get back into my train of thought. Just want to make sure that deletes. I don't know why it takes forever to do it. Alrighty. So, not for us. Every single time, like it can just rain a little bit. Boom, power's off. Um. Anyway. There we go. Alrighty. Okay. Yeah, there went all the likes we had and everything. That just makes me mad. I hate Appalachian Electric. Okay. So yeah, how I found RWBY. So, oh boy. Okay. So it was 2013, of course. And of course, I was not that much different than I am now. You know, I was a huge anime nerd, video game nerd. And I've mentioned it before, but I was in this group. It was like the brotherhood of anime and video game fans or something like that. Very, very, very cheesy. And there was one member who was always very reliable in posting new anime that was either announced or about to air and stuff like that. Now, this was during the days where if you tried to say an American made animation was anime, you'd either get trolled, you get made fun of, you know, stuff like that. I think at that time the only show that was really being talked about was like Avatar, as far as does this count as an anime. And of course, you know, there was people who would make jokes like, oh, Cory in the House, my favorite anime, you know, and stuff like that. Um, Actually, let me reshare this stream real quick. So everyone on Twitter will know. There we go. Yeah, like now, being a nerd or a geek, it's like cool now. It's hip. It's the cool thing to be. Um, because I'll meet people who are like who don't come off as nerds whatsoever, and next thing I know, like there's a coworker of mine. He's younger. He's way younger than me, but he comes off as he's very social. He's very he's got away with words. He's very good. He's got the gift of the gab. And I was talking about my dear friend Nokotan, and he started singing the theme song. So I was like, oh my gosh, If you've not watched that, go watch my dear friend, not DEAR, DEER, my dear friend Nokotan. I have not laughed at an anime that hard in so long. Like it is an amazing anime. It's gonna be the anime of our generation. I'm gonna tell you that right now. But it was kind of big news. Oh wow, Rooster Teeth, the creators of Red vs. Blue, is coming out with an anime-inspired web series, and that's when RWBY was announced. Now, this was back when, YouTube was still very much in its infancy, and live streams were not really a thing. I mean, I still think they were happening, but they were not as smooth as they are today. They weren't even as easy for your everyday person to do. Companies having events, yes, but let's just say this. Simulcasts on television were way more easier to do than a live stream at that time. Now, of course, when I saw, like, the background right now, like, because I think I'm trying to remember. It's been so long. I don't think I saw the trailers as they aired. I think I saw them after they were all out. And that's where, I immediately, decided that Yang was my favorite. And I already liked how Yang and Blake looked side by side just from this poster. The black and the yellow stood out. It really did. And of course, even then, I was into like video games and anime and all that featured strong female protagonists. And really, where that started was Final Fantasy 13. I know a lot of people hated that game, but I loved Lightning in that game. She was, for the longest time, my favorite female protagonist altogether. I just thought she's so badass. She's so cool, And that's kind of where that took off from. And then, of course, this is where I discovered my love for girls' love, because I was so disenchanted with straight romance in manga because it was mostly based off fan service and stuff like that. I'm a romantic. I love a good love story. If a love story can make me cry, it's a plus. And I had not seen many straight romance animes that really did anything for me. And that's also like, where I first saw my first harem anime, which was Tenchi Muyo. And as a middle schooler, yeah, I was like, how does this lucky guy get all these girls that likes him and he runs away from all of them? Now that I'm older, I know why. Just kidding, just a joke. But, of course, since I had just gotten into girls' love, I think the very first girls' love or Yuri anime that I ever watched was Strawberry Panic. And I cried like a baby at the end of that show. Like, it touched me. It touched my heart. And, of course, with RWBY having 4 main characters that were all female, that's, of course, the shipping already began. And I remember on Facebook, everyone already shipping Ruby and Weiss, Blake and Yang, Yang and Weiss, Blake and Ruby. Like, it's right. It started almost instantly. Now, another thing that kept me from watching RWBY as it started airing was, of course, it was a web series. You could only watch it off the internet, and at that time, the only internet in our area was dial-up. Yeah, dial-up internet. So watching RWBY, even though at that time the episodes could be as short as 5 or 6 minutes long, it was still a challenge for me to fully watch it. I would try, but man, some of those even those 5-minute episodes took me forever to be able to watch. So I had to wait until they came out on DVD, and at that time it wasn't even a guarantee RWBY would come out on DVD, because Rooster Teeth at that time was a very small company, and they kind of hit lightning in a bottle with Red versus Blue. So it was at that time, like, not everything was guaranteed to come out on home release, but thankfully RWBY did. I remember picking up Volume 1 at Walmart, and I enjoyed it. Was the animation rough? Yes, but at that time, in 2013, it wasn't awful. But what I immediately loved about RWBY, besides the characters, was the music and the animation. As far as the fight choreography goes, like, to this day, Team RWBY versus the Nevermore is still one of my all-time favorite fights, and it's one of the few highlights of Volume 1. Now, going over Volume 1, I'm using the Japanese covers because they're way better looking than the American ones. Like, I have Volume 1, I had the Japanese version of Volume 1, I still need to get the others because I love these covers. Volume 1 through Volume 9, they just look better. Well, I don't know. Volume 9's a toss-up, because Volume 9's, even the Volume 9 American cover was really good. The art was nice. So when I look back at Volume 1, sadly, it kind of has become my least favorite volume. And that's mostly because with the first season of any show, it's either a hit or a miss, depending how later seasons go. There are shows where the later seasons are so great that the first few seasons pale in comparison. And then there's some shows where it's like, the first few seasons were great, but then it fell off as the series went on. I know there's some people already screaming this about RWBY, but I'm sorry, I disagree. And since this live stream is about volumes 1 through 3, I'm going to give my opinion on the whole, the show fell off after volume 3. No, it did not. I'll go ahead and say that right away. But with volume 1, the animation didn't bother me because, for one, I'm not an animation expert. And like I said, at that time, it was rough, but it wasn't like... I've seen worse. And it's sad because Volume 1's animation is like what turns a lot of people away from RWBY, because they don't wait until it gets better. Because even in Volume 2 and 3, it definitely evolves from Volume 1. Then, of course, from 4 onward, it gets better and better animation-wise. But Volume 1 follows a very standard beginning of a story. It introduces the characters, it introduces some world building, it, gives us all the background that we need at that time. Because, of course, we didn't learn about Salem and all that until after Volume 3. But, they explain the Grimm and all that. We learn about dust. We learn about how the world works. We learn about huntsmen and huntresses. We learn everything that we need to know going forward as the show progresses. Now, one of my biggest criticisms about Volume 1 is the pacing. The pacing is very rough in a lot of cases. A lot of people do not like that just midway through the season, we all of a sudden focus on Jean, and which has barely features Team RWBY at all. Now, being the kind of character that Jean eventually becomes, I understand why, because they try to build a connection between him and Ruby very early on, the two awkward kids and all that. But it's funny because Ruby goes from, at the beginning of Volume 1, like, oh, I just want to be a girl with normal knees, to giving Jean leadership advice by the mid part of the season. It's almost like once Ruby fully embraced being a leader, she adapted to it very well, where Jean still needed some help along the way. And I do think that's one of the reasons why we did have those episodes, is to not only build the friendship and camaraderie between the two team leaders of the main protagonist group and the secondary protagonist group, but also to start building up even more that romance between Jean and Pyrrha, aka the Arco ship. Now, Rooster Teeth was a very small company at this time, so of course, episodes are nowhere near as long as they eventually become later in the series. You have some episodes that are like 4 or 5 minutes long. But it's also, as far as episode count, the longest one. I believe it's 17 episodes, I believe. I'm going to have to double check that. But another criticism for Volume 1 is the lack of build-up as a character for Yang. With Ruby, we get the whole thing about her being an awkward kid who becomes the leader of her own team, who skips a few grades, and all that, coming into her own as the leader. Then you've got Weiss, who is from this very prestigious, very rich family, very hated family. But we learn a little bit as the volume goes on that she is not like her family. Even though she does act very pompous, very full of herself at first, we learn that it is a front, it's an act, that underneath Weiss's cold exterior, no pun intended, there is actually a very sweet, very caring, very lonely girl underneath all that. And so the very beginning of it is her accepting Ruby as the leader, because Weiss went into this expecting to be named team leader. And she has this whole thing where she even tells the teacher that he made a mistake, that Ozpin made a mistake. She thinks she should have been the leader of Team RWBY. And even the teachers right away see that, no, she's being very selfish. A leader can't be selfish. And it doesn't take very long, but Weiss does accept Ruby as the leader and tell her that she'll be the best teammate she could ever be. And then we have the second half of the volume where we learn about the Schnee Dust Company and how they treat the Faunus, Blake being brought out as a Faunus, and, Weiss being like, oh, we should go to the police. The innocent never run. But then by the end of Volume 1, Weiss has decided she doesn't care about Blake's past. She just was happy that she was okay, and that, hey, if you need to talk, come to us. Come to your teammates. Speaking of Blake, we have the whole thing about her being revealed as a Faunus, even though people suspected it all the way at the beginning of Volume 1. The fact that she was a member of the White Fang, which at this time, all we know is that it is a terrorist organization that attacks humanity. But then we see that, with meeting Sun and with all that, she finally, kind of by the end of the volume, decides that she will talk to her teammates, even though, let's just say this. A lot of people talk about how cut off and how wary Blake was. The most of that was really Volume 1, even though there are parts of Volume 1 where she does act silly, and many believe that's Ruby and Yang's influence. She was still very reserved, still keeping a lot to herself. But in Volume 2 and Volume 3, she does come out of that a bit. And so, yes, Ruby, Weiss, and Blake, all three have small but significant character arcs in Volume 1. Yang has nothing. Yang is literally just a background character almost, to where she's just watching events unfold. She has no arc in Volume 1. She's Ruby's older sister that's a hothead. That's it. And I love Yang. Yang's my favorite character. And Volume 1 does her an extremely disservice because she's not involved. It might have just been the show at that time for Volume 1 should have just been called RWBY, because Yang was barely involved. Like, yeah, she was in the fight when they became a team, but after that, she's kind of just a background joke character, telling jokes and being all happy-go-lucky. So yeah, that's my biggest problem with Volume 1. And, like, at that time, you know, what we didn't know was that Volumes 1 through 3 were kind of a prologue, in a way, to the main story. So really, at this time, you didn't really know what the overarch issue was. We knew about the Grimm, we knew about the White Fang, and we knew about Torchwick. And then by the end of this volume, we learn that, you know, he's got some very dangerous-looking allies, with which would be Cinder, Mercury, and Emerald, but not a lot of information was given to us in Volume 1. Volume 1 really is mostly known for a lot of its jokes and a lot of its animation errors. Because, you know, there's jokes in Volume 1 that people to this day still find funny. Like, you know, oh great, everyone's here, now we can all die together. But, you know, underneath Volume 1's very rough beginning, there's a lot of lore building, there's a lot of character building, besides Yang. And really, it's charming in its ways, but it's also so very flawed that sometimes when we go back and watch, I'm just like, let's just get through Volume 1, you know? So that's why to this day it's still my least favorite volume, but it has its merits, because it still needs to be there. It is the beginning. It is the establishment of everything. If RWBY was only 3 seasons long, let's kind of look at it like in Star Wars terms. Volume 1 is Episode 4. It's the beginning. You introduce everybody. You introduce the conflict. You introduce the villains. Volume 2 and The Empire Strikes Back do not really match up to the usual trilogy buildup. Chapter 2 in a trilogy is usually the dark point in the story. Volume 2 is not that at all. That's Volume 3. And Volume 3 is supposed to be the finale, the heroes win, blah, blah, blah. And, who knows how Volume 3... If Volume 3 was it, I do not want to think what this fandom would eventually have turned into. But then, of course, we get introduced to other long-lasting characters like Penny. Okay, very, very poor choice of words. But Penny, Sun, and many others. But now, let's move on to Volume 2, because I think we've already spent enough time on Volume 1. Now, Volume 2 is a weird volume, as this is kind of where the split in the fandom already started. And it's because of 2 arcs. Technically 3. 3 arcs in this volume. So for one, it begins with one of the most amazing first episodes ever, and that is the cafeteria food fight. Like, that scene was like... I remember when Volume 2 came out, that scene, and like, you know, RWBY saying no justice will be swift, it'll be delicious, and all that, that was referenced everywhere. People loved that episode. So, Volume 2 started off on kind of a high note with the food fight. But sadly, a lot of people felt like the longer the volume went on, that a lot of things were lost. The biggest thing was the Grimm. A lot of people felt like the finale of Volume 2 made the Grimm look weak. Made them look like fodder. made them look like generic video game enemies. Like, Team Coffee shows up and just completely owns them. These vicious, destructive, danger to humanity. And they easily get wasted by these 4 seniors. You know, it's a lot of people did not like that, and to a lot of people, the Grimm have never really recovered since that whole thing. Now, I would say Volume 8 definitely made the Grimm a threat again. But, you know, we've not seen the Grimm since Volume 8. You know, we've had Volume 9 where there were no Grimm at all. Now, that was interesting. When we get to Volume 9 in another stream, that's what I'll talk about. Is like, you know, we don't have the Grimm as enemies. So what could we have in the Ever After to fight? So the 3 arcs that I'm talking about are, of course, Mountain View, The Dance, and in a way, this was the true beginning of Bumblebee. So Mountain View is considered like the ultimate filler arc. And in a way, I agree, but no. Because it established a lot of other things, a lot of overarching arcs that would eventually come to fruition. And really, RWBY's rebirth in Volume 9 does not, for me anyways, is not as powerful without her talk with Oobleck and all that in Volume 2. Also, Weiss, Blake, and Yang talking to their past selves is also kind of a boomerang effect from the talk the 3 have around the fire in this episode. And, you know, Oobleck asking them, what do you think makes a huntress? So really, Volume 2, the Mountain View arc is very important for the eventual growth of these characters. So I love the small Mountain View arc, even though once again it just evolves into Team RWBY versus the the White Fang. But this volume also introduces a couple of characters throughout this little run. Now, of course, you've also got the introduction of the Huntress outfits, which they've only worn once, that people still love to this day. There are some that I don't really care for, like I don't think Ruby's as much that impressive. Yang's is still to this day my favorite one. Blake and Weiss's are kind of mid for me. But during that little arc, we are introduced to Neo. Neo makes her first appearance in Volume 2, and she quickly became a very, very popular character. And then, of course, we get introduced to the best boy ever, and that is the one that'll truly defeat Salem, and that is Zwei. Zwei gets introduced in Volume 2, and I don't think the fandom has ever universally loved a character more than Zwei. Because who doesn't love a cute little puppy dog? So then we get to the dance arc, which, in my opinion, yes, above all, had no story importance. It literally made a lot of things, like, the whole love triangle between Weiss, Neptune, and Jean was very pointless because Weiss never looked at Neptune again. Well, no, never mind. She did once more in Volume 3, and then after Volume 3, she never had an interest in him again. But in a way, the triangle helped Arcos in a lot of ways. So I think that's what it was also there for. It was there for 2 reasons. It was for Jean to end up in that dress and to dance with Pyrrha, and to have that very funny dance with Team Juniper. But also in Volume 2, we finally get character development for Yang, and that is burning the candle. We learn about what drives Yang truly, what is really something that she is driving herself to do. And she uses that story to get Blake to stop obsessing over Torchwick and to stop pretty much destroying herself to try and catch him, because Yang's been there. She knows what it can lead to. And then, of course, as she leaves, there's a reason why Yang was very confident Blake would be at the dance. And that's because Yang was like, well, if my story doesn't work, offering her a dance with myself will do the trick. And so she offers Blake a dance. Now, yes, Blake goes to the dance with Sun because it's only fair. He did ask first. But she gives that first dance to Yang, and for a lot of people, this is when they started shipping Bumblebee. But sadly, it would be many, many more years until we finally got the cap off for that. But that's not until Volume 9. And like I said, it's like this volume created a lot of already the divide. A lot of people did not like Mountain View. A lot of people did not like how the Grimm were done by the end of it. A lot of people hated the dance arc. Some people loved it. And this volume really started the shipping war between Black Sun and Bumblebee. And yeah, the fandom never quite recovered after that volume. A lot of people look down, do not like Volume 2 at all. And sometimes that happens. It's the second season. It's kind of like the sequel. The sequel will never be as good as the first one, though I definitely do think Volume 2 is better in a lot of ways than Volume 1. Animation is a bit more crisp. There's not as many errors. The episodes are a little bit more paced out better. They're a little bit longer in some cases. Some characters who got completely ignored in Volume 1 finally get time to shine in this volume. And yeah, to me, it was just a generally better volume. So now, we move on to Volume 3. The volume that scarred the fandom forever. When we finally realized, hey, this isn't a slice of life high school anime. So Volume 3 out of the original 3 volumes is the best animated. I really think, I believe it was Poser that they used for the early volumes. I think they pushed Poser to its limit in this season. I do think that they wouldn't been able to push it much more after this volume. And, it would be a disservice for me to not mention it, but sadly this would be the, I believe it was during production of Volume 3. Was it? I believe, that time is still, yeah, for Volumes 1 through 3 they used Poser. They switched to the Maya engine starting in Volume 4. But yeah, Poser was what they used in Volumes 1 through 3. Like I said, they were kind of pushing it to its limits a lot of ways, especially by Volume 3, and I think that's why they switched to it in Volume 4. But I believe it was during, or maybe it was slightly before Volume 3 when Monty passed away. And I remember getting on Facebook, getting into my group, and it was everywhere that Monty had passed away. And for, I think, a few days, RWBY's future was in question. Everyone was already talking about how if RWBY would continue, but it was not long, I believe, when they announced that RWBY would continue. Because a lot of the story had already been written out. Coming, like they always say, the Ever After was conceived in some fashion before Volume 1 ever aired. So You know, we've learned so much was planned. Like Salem was one of the first characters created, like that they came up with. The Ever After, and the Apathy. Those were all concepted before Volume One. Pyrrha, Her Fate, Yang's Arm, Bumblebee, like all that stuff was already planned before Volume One even aired. So they knew where the show was going. It's just that when you lose somebody, for one, who is that important to production and the show altogether, but who's also a close friend of yours, like, I don't know if I could do it. I don't know if I could continue working on something if I was so used to working on it with somebody else. Um, so yeah, it was a very tumultuous time for Rooster Teeth, for RWBY, and the fandom. Like, it was, everyone mourned him everywhere. And like, I had seen the creator of anime and TV shows pass before, and like the fandoms were sad, but Monty's was just, it was something else. Like, it hurt way more than usual. Um and like, you know, it's, for one thing, it was so sudden. Like, it's not like he had been ill or anything. He just went for a checkup, and one of the things they used, he ended up being allergic to, and he went into a coma. And like, that's horrifying to think that you could just go, you know, you could just go in for a checkup, you know, take my temperature, you know, check my blood, you know, and then that happened. Like, that's one thing I definitely do remember. It was so fast that, like, when it happened, they just, like, they kept him in a coma for a few days before I believe his wife decided just to let him go. And I'm telling you guys right now, I cannot imagine what that feeling is like to let them go. Um, I don't know if I could do it for anyone that matters to me, whether it be a parent or, you know, like any kind of loved one. I wouldn't even be able to take my pet to the vet to be put down. I couldn't do it. I could not do it. So the it was an awful situation. It was an awful time, and the fact that there's still people in this fandom who can feel good about themselves saying, "Oh, well, Monty wouldn't have wanted this," like they actually knew the guy. Like, come on, be real. Um, it makes me sick, and it shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen at all. You know, RWBY has such a great message behind it, but the fact that the fandom can be so dirty to each other and so disrespectful, it's just, you know. But it's the ambiguity of the internet. That's what it is. Um, but anyway, Volume 3 um, starts, you know, with the Vital Festival, a tournament arc, which is always exciting. Tournament arcs are always fun to watch. One of my all time favorite arcs to watch in original Dragon Ball are the World Tournament episodes, because they were just fun. They were fun to watch. We also got to see characters that we had heard about but had not seen on screen, and that being like, you know, like we had them mentioned but had never fully seen the characters on screen yet, and that being like Weiss's older sister Winter, and also Crow. Oh yeah, in Volume 2 we finally also got to see Yang's mom Raven for the first time. So yeah, Raven made her debut in Volume 2. Um, but yeah, Volume 3 was just different. Um, it kind of has a sense, like the very beginning of Volume 3 is not that bad. It's kind of normal as usual. But as the volume goes on, you get this sense of dread. And I, like, at the time, I didn't know what to expect. And it happens, you know. Now, for one, I had a feeling as things were happening in Volume 3 that. Oh, yeah, Volume 2 was also, I think, no, not debuted, because he debuted in the Black trailer, but we finally learned at the end of Volume 2 that Adam is involved with Cinder's group's plan. But pretty much we find out through this whole thing that, they are pretty much planning a downfall of Beacon. And it's one of those things where the fandom, as they watched, knew what was going on, but the characters do not. You gotta love it when that happens, don't you? Because you just want to scream at the characters, "This is going on!" But so of course we get the whole thing with where things start to get built up, and it's really around the time when Yang gets framed that the plan is going into motion. They're trying to create negative emotions. And so the tournament continues, and we learn that they're pretty much wanting, in a way, to turn Pyrrha into the Fall Maiden. That's when we learn about the maidens and all that. And it's like, oh boy. And then, here's the thing about Volume 3 as well. It really seems like during this volume, Jean is finally realizing that Pyrrha has feelings for him, and that he feels the same way. But as I said in that shipping video we did, Arcos was sadly an example of too little too late. Because after they have their little moment, but it turns into a bit of a spat, Pyrrha has her match against Penny. And sadly, that is when we get Penny's death in Volume 3, which really caps off everything. That is when Cinder comes over the loudspeakers, and that's when they have pretty much taken over. I believe they've already taken over the Atlas mechs, and pandemonium just happens. There's so much negative emotions that it literally brings in Grimm from all over. And of course, Adam is there with the White Fang. Like, it's a complete enemy invasion at that point. And I just remember as this was happening, because like I said, I couldn't watch it, but I was pretty much watching people's commentary week after week, because I couldn't watch them really until they came out on DVD. But I was just like, man, everything is going to hell, and I mean, one thing after another happens in that. Like, you have the students who rise to the occasion to try and help defend their school. You have Adam finding Blake, and of course we all know what happens there. Yang losing her arm. And once again, Volume 3 establishing that Bumblebee was where they were going to go. The fact that it was Yang who showed up and lost her arm to Adam, it's just that, it's like, how could people have not put that together? But then we pretty much get the climax. Cinder finding her way to Ozpin, getting the rest of the Fall Maiden powers, because we've learned since then that she only has half of the Fall Maiden powers. She seemingly kills Ozpin, and Pyrrha feels like she's the only one that can stand up to Cinder. Kisses Jean, puts him in a locker, sends him away so he won't get in the way, and goes to face Cinder herself. And like, the writing was on the wall, but you really wanted to hope that somehow she would come out unscathed. And Pyrrha, I think, did put up a pretty good fight against Cinder, but sadly, since she's based off Achilles, that came back. She got an arrow right into her Achilles tendon, and that was the beginning of the end. And Ruby learns where she is. Ruby rushes to try and help her, and Ruby gets there just too late. And like, whenever I watch someone watch Volume 3 for the first time, seeing their reactions to Pyrrha's death and Cinder pretty much reducing her to ash, the pain, it's palpable almost. Them, people crying, screaming, no, no, no. And there's been theories all these years about, Pyrrha coming back to life somehow, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Highly doubt that'll happen, because it would make her death it would make it like it was pointless. Because Pyrrha's death is still following the characters even to this day. It's still definitely following Jean to this day. The fact that he still keeps a part of her with him speaks volumes. And that's why I don't think Jean will probably ever enter a relationship with anyone again. I just think him and her are just fated to be that way. Will Jean live till the end of the series? I don't know. I still think that since he is based off Joan of Arc, he may have a very grisly end waiting for him, but he'll be reunited with Pyrrha, which would kind of make them Ruby's version of Romeo and Juliet. We don't know yet. But once Ruby sees that, she has her Super Saiyan moment. She uses her Silver Eyes for the very first time. And then, next thing we know, we're back home. But things are not good. Lisa's dad has taken her back to Atlas. Blake has vanished. She has ran for it. Yang has lost her arm, and it's very obvious that she is not only traumatized from losing her arm, but she is very deeply affected by the fact that Blake ran. And Ruby kind of feels like it's her job to continue the fight. There is something going on that is way bigger than what they thought. And her, Jean, Ren, and Nora, at the end of Volume 3, head out. And that is when we finally learn about Salem. That there's been a greater evil this whole entire time. So, I'm not going to get into all the stuff that happened after Volume 3 released. I'm not going to go into Shane's letter. I don't have the patience to read a madman's manifesto, because I've tried reading it and it's rough to read through. When I see people claim that the show fell off after Volume 3, it makes me scratch my head, because Volume 1 through 3 are not perfect. They are not perfect whatsoever. Either, Volume 4 is really where the story really starts, where the main scenario really begins, and yet people like the lighthearted, high school slice of life with a little bit of fighting monsters and bad guys mixed into it. I don't know if it's just because people only wanted Team RWBY to be a team of waifus or what, but whenever I see someone say that Volume 4 through 9 are inferior to 1 through 3, it's like, what? Are we watching the same thing? Everyone throws the writers under the bus. And, Miles, Carrie, Eddie, Kiersey, they've all said, could things be better? Yes, but we have to remember that Rooster Teeth, for the longest time, gave them what they had to work with. They didn't have the budget, they didn't have the time to fully flesh things out how they wanted to. Even Carrie said, Volume 9, Episode 1, that's the only one he fully wrote and directed, and he says he sees flaws in it. He wishes it was better, but they did what they could. And people need to remember that Monty did once say that he was not a good writer, and that's the reason why he asked Miles and Carrie to help him with the show, was to help him write it. So I'm not going to get into a Monty discussion because it's not needed. It's not what this video is about. The stream is about. But just saying that volumes 1 through 3 are the best show ever had to offer, no. Just no. It's not. It's far from it. And like, was volume 4 rough? In some ways, yes. I didn't like the fact that Team RWBY was split up, but I think it's amazing that they were able to tell 4 different stories through one volume when the characters were not with each other, where they were all separated. And it doesn't feel rushed. It doesn't feel like there's too much. I have a bigger respect now for Volume 4 than I did back when it first came out. But yeah, volumes 1 through 3 were definitely an era. Definitely for, American styled anime. But for me, who likes a bit more darker storytelling, more of a mature plot, 3 is ranked higher for me because it is a darker volume. It's a way darker volume. But 4 through 9, I just think are better because it has more of a plot to follow. 1 through 3, in a lot of ways, almost feels like a different series because of the tone. And I think that's what turned a lot of people off, was the sudden tone shift. But it's very obvious from Volume 1 that they were building towards something. The moment that they were being mysterious on Cinder in that airship with Torchwick in Volume 1, Chapter 1, we should have known this. We were only seeing what they were wanting to see. We were only seeing the surface of a greater plot and a darker story underneath it. Because Cinder, for the longest time, was portrayed as a very dark character, and for many people, she was going to be the main villain. That's who Team RWBY were going to be up against, was Cinder, and then we get shown that she's merely just a minion. Because at the end of Volume 3, I was like, holy crap, the woman that's been narrating this whole time is the villain. Of course, we would not get Salem's full story until at least by Volume 6. But Volumes 1 through 3, even though I think they are very rough, not perfect in any way, but really what show is. There is no such thing as a perfect show. No show has perfect pacing. No show has perfect writing. No show has a perfect plot. Like, I'm sorry. It just does not exist. Okay? It does not exist. But Volume 1 through 3 is a good time. If you want to just sit down and mindlessly enjoy a anime-inspired show that feels like a slice of life high school anime with a little bit of fighting monsters, fighting some bad guys, and having a little bit of a plot, a little bit of world building and lore building, then yeah, they're great to watch. But if you're wanting something bigger, you're going to have to wait until volumes 4 through 6. Now, as they rank for me, it's definitely Volume 3, Volume 2, Volume 1. Now, even though Volume 1's my least favorite, it still has moments in it that I love. Even though it's a really, really rough volume, Volume 2 has moments that I love. But Volume 3 gets my pick as the best one of the original volumes, like the Beacon arc, as some call it. But eventually we would get Volume 4, which would start the Mistral arc. The girls would get new outfits, and we would get a new engine. That is when they would move to the Maya engine, and it would only, animation-wise, definitely get better. Tone-wise, we would definitely get darker. We would definitely deal with themes that are very dark, like with Weiss, parental abuse, with Blake, self-loathing, with Yang, PTSD, with RWBY, maybe a little bit of survivor's guilt in a lot of way. But that's what I love about RWBY. They're not scared to tackle these serious issues and handle them particularly well. Because I think one of the most important things in a story like this is character development. RWBY, Weiss, Blake, and Yang could not be the same characters that they were in volumes 1 through 3 to fight Salem and her minions. They had to change. They had to have something that would, in a way, mature them beyond their years. And sadly, that was the fall of Beacon. Because ever since then, they have definitely changed into different characters. RWBY is still RWBY, but way more mature than she ever should be. Is definitely the leader of the group, someone that the other three follow now with no question. Weiss went from being cold to being really one of the more loving members of the group. She went from being a lot of people's least favorite character to the most favorite, to the one that everyone says is best girl. But yeah, she went from a very hated individual to one of the most loved. You have Blake, who really suffered from hating herself, to saying that she was better off alone, that she hoped her team hated her for leaving, to now being happy, to smiling more, to trying to put smiles on other people's faces. You have Yang, who went from just being a pun-talking tomboy into a brooding but more mature warrior. But in more recent seasons, the sparks of old Yang are also returning. Like, all four of these characters needed to grow. And I think now, by the end of Volume 9, they're the characters they're supposed to be. Will we get more growth in Volume 10 onward? More than likely, yes. Depends on how close we are to Endgame. But Volume 1 through 3 is the perfect example of beginnings. And it's a great way to watch how these characters started, what their personalities were, what their roles were in the series, and then just from there onward, from Volume 1 to Volume 9, you can definitely see the changes in character and changes in personality, changes in who they are. And really, just doing that could be 4 different video projects that you could write. The character development of Team RWBY, you could definitely write a thesis on because of what they've went through has changed them as people. It would definitely make a great psychological case study in a lot of ways. And it's, it's wild how that's one thing I will always give RWBY credit for. Being a psychology major, it's the fact that they are able to perfectly show how much trauma and loss and PTSD and all that can change a person. And in Team RWBY's case, they changed and conquered their issues for the better. But watching from Volume 1 to even just to 4, it's like completely different characters. And that is why I think Volumes 1 through 3 are perfect beginning volumes. It's not really the story of those volumes. It's not really the pacing, the animation. It's the 4 main characters and how they start off, and you watching their growth as they go through the rest of the series so far. And I think, to me, that is why Volume 1 through 3 are important. Are they the best in the series? In my opinion, no. But they are needed for those later volumes to fully understand these 4 young ladies and their story. Well, guys, I've went for an hour. That's including the start over we had to do because of the power. But I hope you enjoyed it. I just wanted to go over these 3 early volumes. If you enjoyed it enough, let me know, and we'll do one for 4, 5, and 6. Probably will definitely wait until Jess can join me on that one, because 4, 5, and 6 are way more complicated than 1 through 3. But as always, if you enjoy our content, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, click that like button, leave a comment, all that good stuff. As always, guys, this is Canaan. Me and Jess love y'all very, very much. Stay safe out there. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one. See